Welcome to the first episode of Off the Record. What is the show about? It's about absolutely nothing, but it's also about, and we will discuss, absolutely everything. And the reason I do that is because a lot of times when I'm in City Hall and when I'm in my bag, the things I say are very scripted, because they are, because I have to be at times politically correct. This podcast show is about having open discussions about difficult concepts through an intergenerational lens, whether you are a baby boomer, a millennial, a Gen Xer, how you might view the same issue, and then coming up with common ground, because we all see things from a different lens, but you'd be surprised how much we might agree on if we just have conversations that are not civil unrest. I got that from Biden. And so I'm excited about this show. I have some very interesting guests. And one of the things about being on my show, I do not have to agree with you, but I damn sure have to respect you to be sitting at this table. And I respect the people at this table. Let me start with some introductions. How we first met, for real, was he's co-chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Commission that we developed, and former police commissioner Bethel, I thought was a straight conservative, hardcore, to the right. But one day we were in a hearing, and it was in reference to children's fees that got involved with the criminal justice system that were oppressive and creating poverty on the parents of kids that ran afoul of the law. Kevin Bethel went off. He went off for about a good, well, how long was that rant? 15 minutes?
Not too long.
No, it was 15 minutes. By the time he got done damning the system and how it oppressed people, we had hurried around and scrambled to come up with a resolution to ban fees and stuff like that. He was so dynamic in that that lecture that the Department of Human Service, who oversees children's justice, decided they would no longer collect fees. One man's rant turned into a whole city's benefit. And that's why I've always respected Kevin Bethel, and I'm glad to have you in the show.
I'm glad to be here, sir. Glad to be here.
Asa Khalifa. First time I heard the term Black Lives Matter, I heard from you. Now, I've heard it 1,000 times since. It has taken on different meaning to different people. But the first time he came in city council, and by the way, he shut it down, you had two people, you and what's the brother's name?
We're not gonna say his name. But
Okay.
He was there, and there was two other black women watching the door.
Yeah, they took over.
Yeah.
And I did not, when you first meet someone or get introduced to a concept, you don't totally understand it. You consider it radical. You consider it, way on the left side of things. But the more you listen, the more sense it actually made. And the issue was police killings of African-American males in the city of Philadelphia. Single-handedly, because of that, you made us pay attention. So I respect you for that. My third guest is someone I've long known before she was even born. This is my daughter, Casey Jones. And other than the fact that she is my daughter, she's one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. She take after her mother. That was a joke. All right. So, but the reason she's here is she gets to live life in criminal justice reform, Black Lives Matter, in the real world. So it's not a 50,000-foot view from City Hall. It is every day I go outside of my door, I see these things. And in particular, if you don't mind me sharing I'm gonna share anyway, but
I'm gonna share anyway.
I tell people a lot of times they believe that council people live in a bubble and that we live in this pristine life, but you don't realize that we have kids and we care deeply about our families too. 4 a.m, was it? She got the door kicked in. My daughter, first and foremost, she's an auditor. She's a professional.
Now, wait a
She has
minute.
a master's degree out of
Wait a minute.
Lincoln, correct?
Yes, yes.
So
Giving up
she-
all my information here.
So a high-risk warrant unit kicked her door in looking for a suspect that was not there because she bought a vacant house in the city of Philadelphia. They hadn't done their homework to realize that new occupants lived in this house. At the time, how many months pregnant were you?
I was 5, I think. Yep, 5.
She's 5 months pregnant. Her husband, who fortunately was up praying, wasn't startled out of his sleep to hear the doors being kicked in and was able to contain himself because we might have been here talking about a tragedy here. Now, keep in mind, I am balanced. I understand that you have to be careful when you go in the door, but you also have to be courteous when you leave the door. If you made a mistake, say you're sorry. So my daughter, who has also some sarcasm to her, I don't know where she gets that from either, right? Said after they did their search and all that stuff and allowed her to sit on the couch, oh, by the way, I'm Councilman Jones's daughter. It was an awkward silence, like, oh shit. You want to cut that part out, right? And so,
Ba-bum-bum.
yeah. So, so they realized they made a mistake, but still, you should not have to be a council person's daughter to have that dignity and respect in your own home. And I brought up a concept of justice by zip code. They wouldn't have done that in Chestnut Hill. They would have done the homework to realize, but because she lived in Southwest, they felt even if we make a mistake, they must be doing something wrong in there. So with that, those are my introductions. Thank you for being on the show. The concept or the topic today is defunding the police, and we want to look at it from an intergenerational discussion and talk about the first time I heard it, it was a radical, once again, scary concept, but you always have to listen to hear what is being said, but what is being meant. So with that, welcome.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
me.
having us.
Thanks.
All right, so this is my first show, so don't all jump in at once.
Oh, you asked the question.
Yeah,
It was a
okay. What does defund the police mean to you, Kevin Bethel?
question. Ooh. So,
Dum-dum.
so no, actually, when I heard the term, I got it, but I only got it because I've been out of the policing for a while, and was enough behind the scenes to understand what people were trying to do. Right? That we want to do policing, not to do this. We want other people to do mental health. We want others to be engaged in working with our young people and working in the community, which I get. And coming in policing, I was for almost 30 years. I've been telling people all that my life. I mean, we should not be doing mental health. We should not be doing all of these roles that we've been put on policing, which causes all this conflict. But I can also understand it's a loaded word. You got a situation where you're saying defund policing. Most of your surveys, whether you do a Pew survey, everybody, even in the black community, say they don't want defunding of police, right? When they hear that, because at the end of the day, there's 250 million calls of service a year across the nation. In Philadelphia alone, there's about 2 million calls of service. Your constituents. There's an expectation when you pick up 911 for what to happen.
To be an answer.
That it be answered, and be answered what? Timely, right? That requires resources. That requires a lot of effort. And so when you hear that term, people, if I take you to one of these community meetings out here right now, and you go into the room with all of your constituents and you tell them, you know what, I'm going to take half the men and women who are working here right now and I'm going to take them out of here, man, they'll run you out of that office there. You know that and I know that. because unfortunately, particularly in a lot of our communities, you know, especially our challenging communities where, you know, it is the police who are the kind of the barrier between all of the craziness that goes on and doesn't. And so there's a lot of, so it doesn't have to be an either or, right? It's not about whether you don't want less policing and you want, it doesn't have to be this either or. We've gotten to this place, you know, of an either or. You got to either reduce policing to do this. Well, I think you can do both of these things at the same time. And I think as long as we sit in this space of saying defund the policing, it is always going to be that loaded thing that politicians will use and others will use to say we should get rid of, you know, the officers. And I think that's a significant and a very slippery slope.
Asa,
Thank you.
from your lens.
Thank you again for having me. I want to call on my ancestors, Fred Hampton and Malcolm X, into the room to guide me and help me speak for revolution. First, it is a loaded slogan, defund the police. It carries a whole bunch of images that have mostly been taken over by Trumpers and white, side of the conservatives, that whole issue. Let's put it in this proper perspective. Defund the police is not getting rid of policing. It's not getting rid of law enforcement. Defunding the police is exactly what it is defunding them. Police get thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it's not necessarily geared to protect the community that they are here to protect and serve. Defunding the police is reallocating or redirecting money towards what the former officer here said: mental health issues, housing, social issues that we as activists deal with on a daily basis in our communities, because we live in our communities. We live in the communities. We know the individuals who are suffering from mental health. It's to train those individuals who live on the block where those who are suffering from mental health issues know their neighbors, and they can walk in and have a de-escalation session with those brothers or those sisters suffering from that. You don't need thousands of dollars for a tank to service North Philadelphia or Southwest Philadelphia, or a small town in Iowa. You don't need that. The police are receiving way too much money. Police do not prevent crime. You can look at the statistics now. They don't. Police show up after the crime. Police show up after the crime. So let's invest in those funds before it gets to crime. Let's invest in some of those brothers that are coming out who have changed their lives out of the prison system, who still have reputation in the neighborhood and on the block. Let's hire them. Let's train them to go and speak to those brothers, because they can speak with a certain type of reality that maybe we can't speak to those young brothers. So let's take the funds out of the tanks and the guns from the police and reinvest that into the communities that they are sworn to protect and serve. It's our job to make sure that that slogan, that title, is not hijacked, as Colin Kaepernick kneeling was hijacked about American flag, which it wasn't. So we have to make sure that we are educating our people and educating this country what exactly is defunding the police and our demands in the regards of that. So again, use that money to help the communities that you have said you protect and serve. You swore to do that. So invest in the communities that you swore to protect and serve.
Casey Jones, every day when you open the door, what would that mean to you?
Well, okay, so what I experience every day is kind of, there's a dichotomy of what I see. So I see police officers sometimes doing what they're supposed to do, and then other times I do see that it's just this randomized or over-policing in a sense. So it's just like, do I want my children to safely be able to walk down the street? Yes. Do I want the police to kick in my door? No. So I agree with what you're saying as far as maybe defunding is just a really terrible misnomer, and it should have been named something else. So with those funds, and if we look at what those funds are allocated for, if we take that and I want to resurge it into the community, yes. So for instance, there's a ton of black men who have served time over 20 years, over a certain amount of time, and they might originally have a gun charge, let's just say, a VUFA. Their VUFA may not have been received in the commission of a crime. They may not have gotten that because they were, hurting someone or anything like that. They could have been a young man driving down the street, as I know tons of them, driving down the street, got pulled over by an officer. Now, for the rest of their life, although they may have served their time, they have a life sentence of you will never be able to have a weapon. Now, if you look at our city and if you look at the divide, there's no in between. There is no yes, you are allowed, maybe, and no. There's yes, you can have a firearm, no, you can't. So you increase on the side of not protecting and doing things underground, rather than see that there are some delineations that need to be made to recharge and strengthen the community, the black community specifically, so that it's not always for life you're this, or for life there's just no gray. There's either black or white. So I would like to see more of the men in the community have a real life second chance. Not this, all right, well, that's that, because I'm sure if somebody, not me, okay, not me, do an audit of how many black men receive governor pardons for VUFAs versus whites, I'm sure we would see that it ain't right, it ain't fair. So I would like to see those monies allocated to strengthening the community, but still working in conjunction with the police to be able to say, okay, these books need to be balanced differently.
So, in my older view of the world, I struggle with two concepts. That Black Lives Matter has to matter in the White House, in the governor's mansion, but also in my house. And often what I've had to deal with as chair of public safety and city council, and I look at the stats of what's coming through, and it hurts to see that usually in a shooting and or murder, the assailant knew the victim. Every day in Philadelphia, kid gets up, brushes his hair, gets those waves going, throws on a fresh white tee, some jeans, sneakers, and he puts that gun in his hip. He walks out of his door in a 10 square block area to find somebody that looked just like him, might have been related to him, to shoot. How do we balance the policing with, as we say, defund the police? How do we get those monies in places that make a difference to change that young man's life?
Well, this is where the politicians come in.
Who?
This is
Don't be
where-
mentioning no politicians at my.
This is where the politicians come in, because you guys have the ability and the platform to create those laws, to reallocate those funds to your community. We were talking off air before we got on the podcast. We come from this area. We have family in this area. We know where to go to get a gun. I can leave out here right now, and I know 5 spots where to get a gun. We know where to go to the house of the people who are beefing with one another. And so this is why it's so important to have that presence. When we started, me and a few other activists in the Black Lives Matter movement, we started a program 2 years ago in terms of curbing the violence. We can walk up to those young men because we knew them when they were young. We never left our neighborhood, so it's not foreign to them. We can walk up. We just saw you yesterday. What's up, Asa? What's going on? Let me holler at you. I heard there was some beef going on Instagram, because it usually starts that right there. It's our job now, as the old heads did with us, to diffuse this. We can do it. We cannot rely completely on police. Most of the cops, and this is my opinion, don't even give a F about our community. Number one, they don't want to be here. So we need to associate ourselves with officers from this neighborhood. I know 10 officers from this neighborhood who off duty come back to this neighborhood, work with the activists to make sure we can use at least a block by block to diffuse the situations. They're giving back to the community that they live in, that they came from, that their mama lived around the corner, that their grandmother lived up the street, you know? So we have to work with people who we love our community. I don't expect somebody from the suburbs to come into here and understand our culture and understand our community. I don't expect them to do that. I expect from law enforcement is for them to be men and women of their word. Their word is to protect and serve, not to be specific on who they're going to protect and who they're going to serve, and not to have a mentality all of us are criminals. You understand? We love our community. We don't want crime and drugs. We're raising children in this community. We don't want crime and violence in our community. So, but if you paint all of us, law enforcement, with a broad brush, where she's a criminal, I'm a criminal, you're a criminal. Oh, I forgot, it's you, Councilman. I didn't recognize you, but you were a criminal before you know what I mean? You cannot come into a community if you don't give a fuck, about the people in the community.
Okay now.
If you don't give a fuck about the people in the community,
It's
then you
okay to
can't
curse
protect.
on my
Then you
podcast.
can't protect and serve the community. So we got to be honest about who is truly wanting to align themselves with us to make sure that our community is on the uprise, as opposed to gentrifying the community and protecting the gentrifiers that bring their asses up in here. So you're more concerned about their lattes than you're concerned about us going to the bodegas.
Lattes over lives, huh?
Exactly. So that's who I want. I want to work with anybody that's trying, activist, politician, even those in law enforcement. And I have family members in the police force here and law enforcement all over the country, and I love them. But I know where their heart is when it comes to their community. You understand? They don't turn their back on the community. Let's work with people who want to work with us. And for those who just want to occupy us, then send their asses somewhere else. Maybe you need to go back to the suburbs where you feel safe. But we want people that work together as a team, because that's the only way we're going to work to end a lot of our ills in our community.
And can we speaking of which, can we talk about the defunding police? But can we talk about those monies that might be allocated for mental health evaluations for them, though?
Exactly.
Like, because here's the thing, right? If you're situated and you constantly see in a neighborhood the same people coming and going, same people, in your head, you might develop a stigma against them. You might say, I know what you're doing. You got the baggy jeans, you got the this, you got the that. So in your head, even if it's person 100, you have the same outlook of who that person is. You already typecast them. You already know how it's going down, and that's that. Maybe they might need to have a weekly, daily, I don't know how, because I don't know that part. But what I know is they don't get enough mental health evaluations because they might be seeing things through a lens constantly, and now they already know that how they're going to deal with this person. So how often that is, I don't know, but they need the mental health evaluations as well.
No, I agree, 100%.
Do you agree?
Well, I'm listening. You know what I mean?
Well,
It's okay to
No,
talk.
I'm fine. I'm just listening. I mean, you know, I hear, and there's some very good points here, but I think at some point people got to make a decision what they want. You know, most of the officers are good people. They want just good direction. They want to know, what do you want? Now, I've been through this process for 30 years. I've been told, go out there and go. Stop it. Shut it down. Calls from your office and counsel people all over the city. You know what I mean? Get the boys off the corner. I don't want them over there. What are you going to do about those gunshots over there? I got called after your daughter's situation. Why is that happening? I mean, it's been always a front, lean forward. The policing has been the entity that everyone knows We're dealing with the issues of poverty and the issues and all of the violence and all of the things now. If you look at the paper on first thing, coming out in January, what is the police going to do about the violence in the community? Right? There was 499 homicides. Like, what is the police going to do about the homicides? There are 3,000 shooting incidents. What is the police going to do? And then people are shocked when the police come into the area to do something about that. And so I agree with what Issa is saying about the working up front and working with those. I agree with you when you sit there and say, there's got to be an off-ramp. I can't be a life sentence and expect, because the recidivism rate for a guy with a gun, 65%. Why? Because he can't get out of the system, so he stays in the system. So there's got to be off-ramps. There's got to be restorative work, the work that we've been talking about, the work that I do around my juvenile justice. All my friend work is about keeping young kids, particularly black kids, black boys and girls, out of the system, but kids of color out of the system will disproportionately come in for stuff that we used to do in the schools, which we don't do. And so there's a way to do it, but we gotta get to this place where we have to understand, what is it that you want? Because the paradigm, the issues that you raise here is because there's been no long game.
Yeah.
We go through a new mayor, new design,
Facts.
another mayor,
Facts.
new decision.
Facts.
At some point, we got to say, what is the long game? The stuff that Ace is talking about, getting up front, that's got to be a long game, right? It's got to be every day, all the time, every day, all the time. This is what we're going to do, because guess what? As he's doing more of that, I'm still doing this policing. And guess what? Our goal is that I'm handing it off. At some point, as we're doing that, he's got this area locked down, I hand it off to him. Because now the community, because listen, it's not community policing. I mean, it's community policing. It's not policing the community. But what has happened is everybody's taking a step back, and particularly in a lot of these areas, and say, well, you know what? We're not going to do what Ace and what your daughter's talking about. Let the cops handle it. Let the police handle it.
You raise an interesting point. And I had a conversation with a African-American police officer, and we were doing the Brother Stroll, which is for health. We don't take care of ourselves enough. But we were walking, and he said, yeah, Councilman, I'm getting ready to put it on papers and retire. Been with the force 12 years, but I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. So I said, well, why? And he was saying that he felt in the middle of a rock and a hard place, meaning the guys from the FOP don't trust him, the people from the community don't trust him, and he's got to watch his back from each side. He said to me, he told me he had only pulled his gun in those 12 years once. He had only tasered somebody because he was getting his ass whooped. And he said that was the only way I was going to survive. He said 9 times out of 10, he could diffuse something because of cultural competency. So he grew up in these neighborhoods. So he understood, when I walk up on this situation, dude's mad because his lady is cheating on him. He really don't want to hurt her. You know what I mean? But he understands that false bravado, I'm going to say woof, woof, woof. And he would come up to him competently, culturally competent, and say, and where you going to spend the night and what you going to have for dinner? What do you mean where I'm going to spend the night? So if I got to take you in, you're not going to get out until Monday. God knows what your significant other going to be doing in between. And you will be eating cheese sandwiches, or you can go home in peace and work it out with her. Diffuse. He understood.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
he understood.
And I want to get back really one point, because I don't want to let that slide. Black people have always known what they wanted. We've always known what we want, especially when it comes to our community. And we would want to rely on police, but policing, when it regards to black and brown bodies, are so unfair compared to our white counterparts. So when we ask for protection from protecting and serving, we get over policing. We get stop and frisk. We get stop and sexual assault, because a lot of the police officers, and we put light to that as well in the media, when they stop young men and they go down and they grab, and they several young men have even been ruptured, several private areas, because of that type of aggression. It's when we ask for just basic human rights, the same as our white counterparts. They ask for protection, they get protection and serve. They get respect. They don't get someone kicking the door in and then leaving and saying, oh, well, whatever. We get the aggression. we get the over-policing. We get the violence. When we're simply asking for the exact same thing that our white counterparts and any other human being wants to ask and that's just to be in a safe environment. And so many of these murders, many of them would have been solved. Many of them can be solved today. But because of the generational distrust by law enforcement from the days they were called slave patrols on this plantation to now, nothing's changed. It's the same script, different cast. When it comes to policing black and brown bodies compared to their white counterparts, we're going to get the short end of the stick. We don't want violence in our community. You can go around the whole neighborhood. I can bring you to a whole bunch of elders who say, we don't want that. People want to be able to live in peace. We always want to live in peace. Police officers, if they would work with the community instead of occupying the community, majority of them, we could get a lot of these crimes solved because people will feel comfortable working with them, even anonymously, to get a lot of these crimes solved.
I call it the Robin Hood effect.
And I want to say
Go
this,
ahead.
because my cousin a few weeks ago, Morton Murray was shot 11 times just by accidentally stepping on someone's foot in one of the poppy stores. 11 times. He'll never walk again. And thank God he survived. But I want to say thank you to those two detectives who worked with me and my family to make sure that these two individuals were the lookout person and the gunman. And they're in custody at this point. And I can say that because they did every day they were in contact with me and my family, making sure when we were putting posters up and using social media, that's policing with compassion and respect. You understand? So it can happen. I know it happens. I have seen it happen before. Police officers who engage in violent behavior choose to engage in violent behaviors with regards to black people. But we all know that they can hold their peace because we've seen a bunch of white folks rush the damn Capitol. And we saw them hold their peace then. You should have called one of the ushers from one of the churches. They could have solved that real quick, you know? So we know you can contain yourself
So are you
when it
saying-
comes to people
are
that
you
look
saying
like
if
you.
The three of us were, and I was lifting you up into the Capitol, what would have
They would have
happened?
shot all three of our asses. We trying to go up in that damn, and a police officer, you
all right,
imagine,
listen.
you imagine me, wait a minute, you imagine me organizing a march and a police officer gets murdered in that march? Everybody a part of that, in part of the organization is getting it.
Is great.
Every last one of us. And I'm talking about federal charges. So it is a difference when it comes to black bodies and white bodies and policing, whether you want to admit it or not.
No, I'm not going to discount the bias that happens, and I'm not here to do that. I mean, I think one of the things we also have to recognize, we keep putting all these pieces together, right? That, you know, there's 19,000 police agencies across the nation, over 1.5 million. You know what I mean? And so we oftentimes pick these pieces to make the puzzle. And so sometimes I think what it does, it takes us away from what's actually happening here. And so I'm going to sit there and say that, you know, I ran the show, right? I sat there every day trying to figure out. I remember being out here with one of my friends getting killed up here, and I was on a street corner with the folks I grew up with. The issue about is 2,500 people shot last year. Most of them, 95% of them know who shot them. And it ain't because the police. It's easy to say, oh, people ain't coming because they don't trust the police department and they're not going to tell them who shot them. And they said, you know the street. It's baked into that is about, you know what I mean, retaliation. Baked into that is around you can't snitch. Then guess what? If your daughter says, I shot, she knows I know you. My cousin lives around the corner. My brother lives over there. So there's so much pressure in the community. And so, yeah, it becomes easy, just deflected. Oh, they're not going to tell the cops because they don't trust the community. Trust me, there's a whole bunch of men and women out here that the community trusts. It's not a one-off. You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of them. But sometimes it's hard to get to it because we have all of this these other things, and it goes back to we got to unpack this thing, right? We got to unpack it. If we're going to redo this thing, if we're going to reimagining policing as it's talked about, you got to You talk about the onions. She was talking about earlier about the onions. Those layers, you got to get down and really, because part of it's like self-hatred. Why do we hate ourselves so much that we kill each other?
So,
And I'm not saying, and I know that's rooted, they said you can take us to that space. But part of that has to deal with, why does these young guys feel like we kill amongst ourselves? Sometimes I would sit there, 12-year-old boy got killed, shot through the door the other day. Nobody say nothing, right? You hear a little bit of chatter. You know what I mean? He gets shot through the door, killed. Man, it used to be a time, man, we would be screaming from the rooftops. And so not only is it even, we keep talking about this stuff, but now it's almost as if we are anesthetized to it now. 500 young brothers and sisters got killed last year. 3,000 times they shot on the streets. 3,000 times somebody discharged a weapon trying to shoot somebody. You know what I mean? 2,500 of them get shot, or whatever the number is, 2,000. And you're sitting there saying, all that beefing, all that stuff is percolating in our community. Now, guess what? We come into another year. We just add more fuel to it. How do we get to that place?
so it's interesting you say that. Me and my colleagues have looked at, and we've got, so I always say, if 300 whales washed up on the Delaware shores, Jacques Cousteau himself would come back from his grave, 300 other scientists to figure out, was it the water, or was it this? 300 of us get shot every year, and it's like another teddy bear memorial funeral, and that's it. So we've looked at the last 100 shooters that is now turned into last 2,000 shooters to see what commonality they have. How
What's
did
the
that brother
commonality?
get to that space where he shot that guy? And how did that gun get to that space that was used? And if this is not their first time at the rodeo, second time, what in the justice system failed that they didn't either get intervention and help or gotta go, you know, because those are the things that whether or not it's poverty, whether I get it, but there are certain onion layers that you're talking about. 90% of the people on State Road come from 11 zip codes in Philadelphia. Out of the 48 that they are, 11. Out of those same zip codes, 23 schools closed. School to prison pipeline on that track is real. So it's not one thing. We've got to look at a number of things. The other piece that we got to look at is some of it is over bullshit beef. Instagram gangsters, Twitter gangsters.
So to your point, I'm not going to drag my daughter into this. However, I am a little bit. So the other day, you know, these kids, they get their phones and they're doing their thing or whatever. So I just, you know, I'm quick to snatch a phone. You know what I mean? I just walk through. Let me see that. You know.
I didn't do that to you.
Well, you didn't have to. I was the model child. I was good. Anyway, so the point is, I snatch a phone quick. So I snatched the phone. I see that, you know, the kids are all home. So technically, there should be no beef, right? There should be no problems. Kids shouldn't be going back and forth with each other, but they are. They find their ways on these social media sites. So I will snatch a phone. I pay for it. You better not say anything that I don't like. So it was an unsavory conversation. Unsavory. So I decided I'm going to let this go on a little further and see if she can diffuse it. As I'm reading, a day or two later, she couldn't do it. So what did I do? I start sending out mass text messages pretending I'm her. Let's all be friends. Let's all be nice. Let's da-da-da-da. So a month, 2 months goes by, and one of the little girls figures that she's going to find another way to come say what she wanted to say. Unsavory. So I knew where she lived, around the corner, right? So might not be the best approach. Don't quote me. I mean, so I go knock on the door, and I say to the little kid that came to the door, I need to see your mom. Mom comes to the door. We have a talk. She gets her daughter to come down, and it was squashed just like that. And I'm not saying with grown men, you know, they're not arguing over just regular stuff, but the point is, I'm in the community. I know where you live. I know where your mother is. I know who you are. We're going to get to know each other real well. And at the end of it all, at the very least, don't talk to each other. So
We used to-
somewhere in
In the
there,
community,
uh-uh.
if my mom would come and knock on your
That's how it
mom's
used to be.
door.
Right.
And if you were heard cursing in front of my mom, she had the right to tell you stop.
Yeah.
And we actually respected each other.
Right, because, I mean, well, now you hear the hood. I grew up in the neighborhood, right? I grew up in the 5800 block of Christian, and ain't any mother and father on that block could tell me to shut up. Right now, we come on the block. There used to be
They're not.
respect in the block, right? And we had these guys over here, man. They know, man. We had Osage gang, Christian Street gang. We had all the gangs out here. But guess what? My mom came down the street. Yo, Mr. Odessa's on the block. Man, them boys be going hard. Stop in the middle of the fight. Let my mom usher her through so she can get in the door. You all right? We never heard. I remember my parents out there. We got adults sitting on the steps getting shot. Like we have our parents sitting on the steps getting shot. You know what I mean? And or in their through their doorway. I have a mother. My mother and who's passed, but my mother-in-law lives in Middle North Philly. Can't come out the house. Right? We have parents. We have our parents who jump in the tub because they hear the gunshot, so they got their little evacuation plans. They go low. Right? So it really, and so this is a good conversation because I appreciate what they're saying, and that's why I say it takes work. You know what I mean,
Yes,
it takes people got to get on the ground. You can't sit at 40,000 feet and think you know what the hood is about. I used to tell my cops the street got a pulse. Like I never rode with my window up. I used to get in the car when I trained somebody. I said, put the window up. You can't hear nothing. Put it down. You can hear the chatter in the street. The street got a pulse, but you got to get down there and feel the damn thing, right? Everybody thinks they know what's best for our communities. Everybody think they knows. And then here's the funny part. Every community is different. I go to Germantown, a little different. West Philly, well, we like our things a little different. South Philly, whoa, they like their things certain different. And so to your point, folks in those communities, the only way this thing is ever going to work is communities have to take back their communities.
And us
You know what I
giving
mean? And it's-
resources.
And
so
the
they
resource,
can
but yeah, but
address
here,
the
and I'll say with that, but the resources,
Resources,
but see,
yeah.
you can't get money because you ain't got the big dollars, right? You don't have the evidence-based practices, you're right? You don't have the backing of all of that. So when you go to apply for get a grant, they look at you like, you know what I mean? Now you got, but somebody else can come in over you and then give you a little crumb. No, we got to start saying, Miss Johnson, I could walk into a meeting and that Miss Johnson is in the room and she loved me, you know that. You got those meetings you go to yourself. If she loved me, she shut the whole thing. Don't you holler at that's my guy right there. You know what I mean?
love
And she
Miss
got
Johnson.
more power than anybody in that community. If you go to her, to what Asa said earlier, she'll shut the whole thing down. But we don't partner with her. We walk over her. We walk by her like she don't, she ain't got a suit and tie on. I used to tell man, when I walked in the room, the first person I gave her a hug. Because I knew
Send a signal.
Because it sent a signal to everybody that I respected her. I respected her. It was friend of yours, friend of mine. The other 100 in there, man, he's a cool dude. But we gotta get to a place where we gotta start putting money into it. There's no anchors in here. You know what I mean, anchoring, we're not employing our kids. We're not doing all of those necessary things to keep, like even now, from my school side, I'm scared to death of my kids. I see a young girl the other day, 9 years old, who gets shot in her house. You know what I mean? He's like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Every time you turn around, you're seeing all of this stuff. Man, we got to get to a place where we got to take all of this energy. Like early, Ace said, no, man, Black Lives Matter, man. When I first saw Ace out there, man, I couldn't stand him. Man, I'm Uncle this, they cussing me out, man. You know what I mean? I'm like, God, man, come on, man.
Hey,
You know what I mean?
Hey, put it on me.
No,
too.
no, but listen.
We have evolved.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But you know what? But I evolved with it because I said, it's like I didn't understand at the beginning. I got cops getting killed. We out there. Listen, we march, man, 10 miles a night sometimes, man. We out there going at it.
And it's the passion
Right.
and the love that we have for our community
Yeah,
that
it's-
brings out the
right.
frustration because we haven't abandoned our communities. We live it. We live here. We know everyone here. Every death that happens on our block, we feel it just as if they were our own relatives. In terms of the young people, first of all, I want to get to your point real quick, Councilman, when you said partnership. That's so important. When you see Sister Johnson or when you see, quote unquote, Big Mom and she's running it and you hug her,
That's right.
make sure you connect her with some grant money so she can come in and partner and bring that back to her community too. So hug her and then give her a grant so she can do what she can do and you know that she's capable of doing. Secondly, we really need to rally around. Our young people are hurting. A lot of this anger, and for those who are mentored, a lot of our young people in our neighborhood are hurting. Either the absence of the father in the home, And that plays a huge role in it because a mother
Huge
can love us,
role.
but you cannot teach us how to be a man and how to handle issues as a man would handle in conflict. They're hurting and they have no support. They don't have any support from the top down. You don't know, a lot of these young people who are involved in the system are coming out of a foster care home. A lot of these young people have been sexually abused and
Right.
physically abused, the boys and the girls,
Right.
and are carrying that hate. And there's no resources where they can go in confidence and alleviate that pain and try to navigate in that pain. The killings are operating out of pain. So when you have nothing left but pride and someone challenges
That's
that,
right.
you're going to protect it with your life. So here comes the guns. So this is where we as activists, in partnership with those who care about our community, will come together and really build a safe space. There are a lot of places, but there are very few safe spaces for our young people to go. Okay? Young people should be able to have that open door policy to come in to your office, Councilman, and a lot of the council people, and say, this is what's happening to me. Where can I go to get some resources? Our lights are off. I mean, I went to one council person, I won't say the person's name. The family lights were off. They were desperate. A young man came to us and said, my mother is sick, she doesn't have a job, she's out of work. This is happening. The lights are off. The mother went to the council person, they blew her off. So now the young man is looking at us and saying, I'm going to do this with this gun. You understand?
Do for my
Because
mom.
there's no resources and there's no compassion when it comes to us when we go to these places. We have to build a partnership to mend the hurt that are happening. Young people need to, most of them don't even see themselves living after 18 years old. A lot of them look at themselves in the mirror and hate what they see. So when they hate their reflection, of course it's easy to hate someone that looks or resembles them, you know? So it's a mental health issue too, getting back to defunding the police. Invest those resources in community services. Invest it in community centers. Have them operating 24 hours a day. Night centers. That's a good idea for young people to go to feel safe so they don't have to be on the streets.
We had that under the street administration.
Yeah,
Maybe
John
like
Street, I believe, had something
I
in that
thought
sense.
about that before, like subset stations
Absolutely,
where
absolutely.
maybe the community have a stronger anchor in
Exactly.
it, and people can feel more comfortable to have it like a drop-in center almost.
And then when your piece said about the mental health, you got University of Penn, all these colleges, Temple, receiving all these tax breaks and money. You understand? Why not force them to say, we're going to cut off a lot of these taxes. We're going to cut off a lot of your fortunes that you're making off of the backs of poor people in this city. You're going to make sure that you provide for every neighborhood in this city that your college is located in mental health issues, mental health services to deal with the mental health issues. When you see your best friend get shot in the street and there is no place for that child to go to decompress, you know, and this is where the politicians come in. We're going to block everything that y'all jokers are trying to do unless you do this for our community.
Yep. It's one of the things you
You
just
got to use
said,
your bully platform.
Yeah, one of the things-
to do that.
and the reason why what your movement was important is that it made us, first of all, take a look at what you were saying, and then looking around, counting the votes, saying, you know what? We have the votes to change it. We don't have to ask permission.
That's right.
We can move these issues forward. And if you've looked at the last year of council, we've passed more progressive pieces of legislation than in the last 10 years. But so when the community demands a different direction, if you're at least listening and not tone deaf, you start to move in the right direction. So those partnerships, I think, are key. You said something about safe spaces that I remember when Senator Vincent Hughes started He was state rep. He's running for state rep. We had a little office, a little storefront. It's cute by comparison nowadays.
Yeah,
We
it's
got a
pretty
little bit
nice,
of-
man.
Yeah. So we were in there, and we were folding, stuffing mail, and all this stuff. A young lady would come by every day after school, and she would get there around 3 and wouldn't leave until we closed. And after a while, after weeks of this, and she never smiled. What I remembered was she never smiled. And I said, you ain't got nothing better to do than help us. She said, this is where it's safe. She had been abused by her stepfather, and at least during these hours, she could be there, and we dealt with it. We dealt with stepdad, we dealt with all of that. If you don't talk to them and listen, you won't know where their pain is coming from. So you're right. You'd be surprised about internships and volunteering and people just hanging out and feeling comfortable enough to talk to you.
And not get frazzled if you meet them and the first thing you meet is their pain.
And
Get underneath those onions that we were discussing.
She like the onion. You like the
Understand?
onion.
And
I
pull
guess
those
it's the
layers
onions,
back and you'll
mate.
see the root of the pain. And then you can come in and offer the support that they need.
Yeah.
And I just want to double down on
Powerful.
what he's saying because you know when we talk about trauma in the black community, it seems like it's some soft. Like I tell people, policing man, you know, you pull up by your bootstrap, right? I came out of the neighborhood, why can't you? You know what I mean? But we don't want to talk about mental health in our community. We don't want to talk about the trauma. And his point, that's where I work, right? And my work is all in my juvenile justice work now. So it's around really getting upstream. And work with those young kids, man, and
Well,
get
that's
into
why I
the
like you
trauma.
now.
And I appreciate it. But more importantly, I think. But what he's saying is we don't have a concerted effort
Yeah.
to say, listen, we know the trauma. Like even in the school district, right? We get a kid who gets shot or killed. Right away, we start a rapid response, right, into the family, into the not just them, the sibling.
Yeah.
You know, does he have a brother? Does he have a sister? Because you know there's going to be this needs, right? The
Repercussions.
principals, but it can't just be a school thing, right? I think it came up the other day. It's got to be a community thing. Like, how do we, if we don't get to those root issues, we're never going to get to the root problem. Because part of what I say, people say, well, you divert these kids. You know what I do? I put them into a program. You know what the program do is try to get to that pain. So the young girl smoking weed before we lock her up. Now you get in the room, she's oh, here comes the sexual abuse. Here comes the self-medicating. Here come all those other underlying issues. And when you're able to get to that place where she trusts you enough to, because like, why is a young girl gonna come up and say, I'm being sexually abused, knowing, well, where am I gonna go sleep tonight? What's gonna happen to my brother? I'm taking care of I'm covering, I take the abuse because I don't want my little sister to get it too. And then she gonna come over and raise her arm and say, no, man, you got to work. Right, you got to build her to a place where she trusts you to say, I am being abused. Because she knows when she opens that door, ain't no coming back from that. And so she's got to know what's on the other side. So that means you got to invest in them. You got to spend money in that space. You got to have people in that space.
We definitely have to be visible and accessible.
Exactly. It's
We have to be
100%.
visible and accessible.
Because you got to you got to trust you. They got to trust you. Even not even from the police, but they got to trust the folks who are coming to that
But see,
yeah.
that's why coaches,
Oh yeah.
that's why counselors,
Those are the
that's
unsung
why
heroes of the
teachers
community.
Absolutely.
that
They know.
develop these long-term relationships that we should fund are critical. Because you gotta, if you don't have that structure in your household, then you find it where you can, whether it's a basketball court or a classroom or a church or a masjid. You have to find somebody that you can attach to help with that pain.
Yeah, I mean, they tell you one positive adult in the child's life can change the totally trajectory of where they go. Yeah,
One
I mean,
word
and- yeah,
of,
what?
of encouragement, to plant that seed of encouragement, to see them in a different light can change the whole dynamic of their way of their thinking. And these mega preachers that's up in this damn city,
Whoa,
y'all
whoa.
asses need to come out. I hope y'all listening. Y'all tired asses need to come out of your high price church money that you're getting and bring your asses down to the neighborhood
Find
and
the-
stop
yeah.
preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Come down here to this neighborhood, and then you conduct your services here. Really follow the revolutionary Jesus, okay, who forsake himself and put others before him. That's the true Jesus you should be following. For you mega pastors that run your mouth every time a politician wants an endorsement.
Woo. On that, Welcome to Off the Record. The opinions expressed don't necessarily reflect that of management. Everybody here is at the dinner table on their own.
I have to bring a little spice, Kurt.
Yeah, I know that's right.
But it's the truth. You know it.
What are we doing, y'all? We wrapping it up? Wow, time flies. I am truly thankful
I appreciate
to
that.
my guest today for bringing it from the real. Off the Record is about absolutely nothing, but usually we're going to talk about a little bit of everything. So, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all come back now, you're here. And I appreciate, one of the purposes is, you'd be surprised how much we agree on if we talk about it.
It's true.
You'd be surprised. And so, with that, the struggle continues. And until next week, this is Off the Record.